Hi guys, Ray here from City Fan TV. It's time for the preview of the game against West Ham, and I'm joined by West Ham fan Jim Salveson. How you doing, Jim?
Yeah, I'm good. How about you, Ray?
I'm doing very well, mate. I'm doing very well. Jim, you've not got that southern twang.
Well, I've kind of lost it a little bit. I'm born down south, but actually, I've lived up here in Manchester. Good part of 15 years now. So I've been up here a while. So everyone in Manchester thinks I sound like a southern twat. Everyone down south thinks I sound like a northern monkey. It's like
Well, you
I can't win.
And you. But what do you do as a day job then, Jim?
So I'm director of sport at VoiceWorks, which is an audio agency. We make podcasts and we make audio stuff for various people, focus on sports, but also run the Sports Social Podcast Network, which is a place where people can find their next favorite sports podcast. We've got 300 or so shows on the network, including the official Manchester City podcast, which has some great guests on it. Like they've recently had Rico Lewis. They've got another few first teamers lined up for the next few episodes. So yeah, that's the day job.
So people, how can they get involved with that if they want to do their own podcasts?
Well, if you're a creator or if you want to just find the podcasts that we have on the network, just head to the website. That's the first port of call. It's sport-social.co.uk.
Fantastic, guys. Have a look at that, and I'll pop it in the description in the down below. Going to get on to this previewing this game. It's an exciting game between it's a top of the table clash.
Who'd have thought it?
It's the biggest game of the weekend. But I'm going to start with a question that I'm sure will bring a smile to your face. How does it feel to be one sort of European champion? You know, you guys won the Europa Conference League last season. How good does that feel?
Yeah, do you know what? It was a really weird one. And I'd be interested to know whether City fans had this same experience when, after years of nothing, they kind of slowly started picking up silverware and how that first one felt, because I didn't know what to do. When I was watching the game and afterwards, it was kind of like I wasn't really prepared for how it was going to feel, and I wasn't really prepared for how I was going to react when we won that final. I watched the final on my own. I didn't kind of want the pressure of being anywhere. And it was such a tense, horrible game with kind of one moment of magic at the end that I was just in knots by the end of it. And I don't think it was until a few days later that I started to see the celebrations of the players and the parade that went through the East End of London and the comments of the players. Like Jared Bowen gave an interview to the official West Ham podcast a couple of months, which is also on our network, by the way, a couple of months after the kind of match had happened, and hearing how much it meant to them as individuals kind of helped it sink into me as a fan. And I've heard a few West Ham fans going, "Oh, it's the best day of my life, better than when my kids were born." I don't think I felt like that at the time because it took too long to sink in. But looking back on it, it was an amazing achievement, and all my skepticism about the Europa Conference League when they launched it has ebbed away now. It's now Europe's premier competition in my eyes.
I hear you guys singing Champions of Europe. That's what you're thinking now. I'm not going to stop
Why
you
not?
because in one way you are. So, I think we can hold that cup jointly, one hand on each side of it. But I think the question about City fans, I mean, I've watched so much stuff about the 2012 league title. Obviously, we won the FA Cup the year before. Some people still say Yaya Toure is the most important or their favourite player of the new era because of he scored the winning goal.
Sure.
And which is it's fair dues to them. But I watched so much stuff about the City win for years and years and years, and it always brought a tear to your eye. Always. All right, now so much time has passed that you can control some of those emotions, but occasionally you'll see something and it will bring a tear back to your eye. You know, some of the older fans and who'd been supporting City through thin and thin for so many years, and what it meant to them. So I think over time it'll, especially if you don't win anything else over the next few years,
it's highly probable.
It will become, I think, an even more important moment in everybody's lives, because you can't forget that feeling.
No, and I think what it does do is it kind of proves the point that these moments in football really need to be cherished by fans, and also they need to be prioritized by football clubs, because you get so many football clubs that will enter a cup competition, whether it's the League Cup or the Europa
Yeah,
Conference or whatever it is, and that's not the priority. The priority is survival in the Premier League, and you can understand that from a financial point of view, but from a
yeah.
fan experience point of view, the experience of winning something is so important, and it comes around, not for City, but it comes around for most teams so rarely that it's kind of it's an important moment. What is football without winning?
Absolutely. I mean, you asked the Wigan fans who beat City in the 2013
Yeah,
FA Cup final whether they would have rather lost that and stayed in the Premier League. They'd rather won that game, got the relegation, and had all the problems that they subsequently had for that moment of glory. And
yeah,
that's what it
completely.
is. It's I think most football fans want that. They want that moment because, as you say, it only comes around once every so often. They want that moment in the sun. And thankfully for City, we're very fortunate. It's happening on a regular basis at the moment. That's because of Pep and the owners. So talk about managers. I want to bring up David Moyes. Now, there's been a lot of flack thrown at David over the last 18 months, I'd say.
Yeah.
2 years. You especially since you'd been flying high in the league. Last season was, I guess, a disappointment league-wise for most of the season. It come towards the end, you started picking up results and moving up the league. But even after you'd won the Europa Conference League, there was some vociferous fans who wanted Moyes gone. They said, it's time. He's won something. Get rid of him. He's a dinosaur. It's not great football. We've been struggling, and that'll happen again. What are your opinions on David Moyes?
First off, I'm going to caveat everything I'm going to say by saying I admire David Moyes for what he's done at West Ham United, and I think when he was brought in to be manager of the football club, he was the right man. I think what he did in both spells at the club was really important for where we were at that time, our stability and our future. But I would also say that I was one of the voices in the summer who said, look, it's time to draw a line under it. We've got an opportunity here coming off the back of being European champions to one of the European champions to kind of develop and build something at the football club. And I'm not convinced yet that David Moyes is the right man at the helm to do that. I think there's two sides of football, right? There's winning stuff on the pitch that we covered, and there's also what you have to sit through for 90 minutes every weekend. And quite often it's easy to separate those things. And I think there's two types of fans. There's the fans that watch the games, and there's the fans that watch the results and watch the social media. And there's nothing wrong with being either of those. But if you're watching the results and the social media and the clips and the goals and all that kind of thing, you're probably much more accepting of David Moyes as a manager than if you actually watch the games. If you watch the games and you're sitting through 90 minutes of turgid football every single week, then you've probably got less of a love for him. I think we're in a great position at the moment, and I think we've got a really strong squad and a strengthening squad. And for me, it feels like now is the time to progress our football on the pitch with a manager who likes to play football. I think David Moyes is a great manager at doing a job. I think he's got a bit of the steel back into him that he maybe lost after being sacked by Manchester United. I think that damaged him as a manager and damaged him as an individual. I think he's got a bit of that confidence and that steel back. And I think he'll go on to do a decent job elsewhere. But I'd like to see a little bit more style and panache on the pitch that suits a football club with the ambitions that West Ham does have.
Yeah. I mean, looking at this season, then, have you not started with a little bit more?
No.
Aren't you? You don't think so?
No, not at all. I think you look at the results, and the results have been brilliant for West Ham this season. And I think they're papering over the cracks to some extent because, I mean, you look at the Brighton game, for example. I think it was the Brighton game. Now, we've not beaten Brighton in the Premier League for getting on for 8 years or something ridiculous like that. They've been a real bogey team to us, and rightly so, because Brighton are a brilliant football team who play fantastic football and they deserve their success. But West Ham have always found them difficult to overcome. And we beat them 3-1, which is a brilliant result. No one expected it. I think we expected to get off the start of the season negatively. We had 20% possession or something along those lines in that game. And all the goals we scored were breakaway counter-attacking goals. Now, counter-attacking football is brilliant to watch. I love it. It's fast, it's quick, and when it's done well, it's really inspiring. But when you get 4 moments of that over the space of 90 minutes, I don't think it's a particularly enjoyable watch for a football fan when most of your time is spent with your backs behind the wall. I think the Chelsea game, which we won, I think we were pretty lucky in that game. Chelsea deserved to be several goals up within the first half of that, and potentially would have won that if it wasn't for an injury. The Bournemouth game, the first game of the season, I think that was probably a fair result, and you would like to see West Ham beating Bournemouth. And the Luton game as well, even against the opposition that was Luton, we didn't really manage to control the possession or the game in that either. I'd say Luton were, I mean, it was one of those games where you got two strong physical teams that like to slog it out on the pitch. So I've not really seen West Ham as a team grasp hold of a game now. It's very much soaking up pressure and breaking on the counter, and it gets results. But I think it's a type of football that's suited for a pretender in the league, someone who's just come up, rather than a team that is established and is looking to take itself to the next level as West Ham are.
Do you then see this as potentially being David Moyes' last season? You know, if he does really well again, results-wise, could he get a contract extension?
I mean, you've got to kind of get inside the chairman's mind to know what the scenario is there. I fully expected him to go in the summer, and I think if it hadn't been for if he lost in that final, I don't think he'd be the manager anymore. And there were suggestions he was on the brink at various points in that. I think his relationship with the chairman is really strong. I think they get on well. David Moyes doesn't ask for too much from the chairman, which I think is an important part of their relationship. I understand he's not the most expensive of managers contract-wise, but his contract is up at the end of the season. And that is an opportunity to kind of make that move without them paying that compensation to him for ending his contract early. So, yeah, my feeling is that depending who's available at the end of the season, because that's the risk you take, isn't it? If you wait to a certain point, you've got to kind of see who's in the market and who you want to bring in. But I think providing there's a viable and an interested alternative, then it could be David Moyes' time to walk away from the club. And he'll do so with, well, if it gets to that stage, if he manages to survive this season and the results do go our way, and early signs are pretty good at the moment, he gets to walk away with his dignity, which I think is quite important for him and what he's done for West Ham as well.
Yeah, he's not had a chance in the last few years to walk away with dignity from any job. You know, Man United, Sunderland, that job in Spain, I think he went to. Real
Sociedad.
Yeah, and we make a change for David. Let's move on a bit. The new stadium, well, it's not a new stadium. It's over 10 years old, that stadium.
Yeah.
But how do you think are they finally taken to it, or will they never accept it?
There'll be, I mean, again, it's like there's a similarity between West Ham and City here, isn't there? In terms of there's always going to be a portion of City fans who harp on about how they wish the club had never left Main Road, and they'd rather be in Division 2 watching football in Main Road than they would be winning the Premier League in the Etihad Stadium. And I'd say it's a very similar thing at West Ham, and we're very much still in a transitional phase of getting used to that stadium. It's not Upton Park, and it never will be Upton Park, but we're rapidly losing those stadiums up and down the country. And if a club wants to progress, you need to move to a bigger ground with better facilities. Now, the challenge with the London Stadium is it's not a football stadium, it's an athletic stadium. And because of that, you have that distance between the pitch and the seats. Now, there are plenty of stadiums in Europe that manage to cope with that. And it's just what the fans are used to. I mean, look at somewhere like Benfica Stadium, the Stadium of Light. That's a fantastic football stadium, but it's also an athletic stadium. And they get away with that because it's been their home for so long, and the atmosphere in there is cauldron-like and fantastic. But also, it's where the fans have witnessed great performances and winning performances. So I think there are some fans that are kind of slowly getting used to the idea of the London Stadium because they've had some fantastic nights there and because they've seen some great victories. And I don't think it's too bad. When the team are winning, there's a really nice atmosphere there. When the team are losing, it's like a library. But that's the same with many of these big stadiums. And I was there for the Europa Conference League semi-final victory against FC Alphabet, AZ, whatever they're called. And it was a fantastic night, and the place was jumping. And there's one big problem with it is there's a big space over to the, I think it's the south stand. Anyway, one of the stands where the Olympic torch was during the Olympics. And that's a big void at the moment. So if you're sitting anywhere near that, it feels very strange because you've got a big gap. But other than that, it's a good stadium to play football, and it costs us £2 a year or whatever in rent to
What a
play there. So yeah,
I mean, that's if you're talking about states, handouts to clubs. I mean, that's the one that no one seems to talk about anymore.
I'd be furious if I was anything but a West Ham fan. I'd be absolutely furious with what's happened there.
Yeah, but I mean, look, you guys got to take whatever's offered and accept it. Let's have a quick look at some players. Obviously, Declan Rice went in the summer. You got a lot of money. Personally, I think you pulled Arsenal's pants down to get as much money as you did because that's where he wanted to go. What do you think of Declan's time at West Ham? What he's achieved there, and do you think you're going to miss him?
I think I was gutted when Dec decided he wanted to leave, but it's something that the club and the fans have been preparing for 2 years because, quite simply, he was too good for West Ham. And ever since he made his debut, you could tell there was an exceptional player there. And it's been a pleasure to watch him develop in that West Ham team and not only become instrumental for West Ham in the middle of that midfield, but also become instrumental for England in terms of their success in the Euros and the World Cup recently. So it's been incredible to see him play through the West Ham ranks. I think a load of credit needs to go to Mark Noble as well, because I think Mark Noble was being key to that development for him, if not as a player, certainly as a person. I'm choking up. Certainly as a kind of personality and the leader he is. So as upsetting as it has been to see him move on, it's also with absolutely no hard feelings at all, because he has been a hugely loyal servant to the football club. I think he played the transfer perfectly. He didn't force a move at any point, but it was clear that if we were going to get the value for him that we wanted, which the 120 million or whatever it ended up being, was just evidence to how important he was for West Ham. And I think everything kind of worked in favour, and I look forward to seeing how he develops at Arsenal. And he started at West Ham as this simple playing holding midfielder, and now he's a box-to-box midfielder that reads the game better than I think any DCM in the world potentially. So I really look forward to seeing what he adds to his game at Arsenal and how he does. If I thought we'd miss him when he first left and 3 weeks into the transfer window, I thought we were done for. Yeah, because we hadn't brought anyone in. We'd got this money sitting in the bank, and he'd left, and he was leaving such a huge hole in the centre of our midfield. I think, actually, for the first time I can ever remember, West Ham have played it incredibly shrewdly in the transfer market and brought in players that not only potentially replace him, but kind of maybe upgrade the team as well, because we've gone from being a one-man team where we were so reliant on how well Declan Rice played in a game that if he was injured or if he was off form, then the chances were shattered, to bring in 3 or maybe even 4 players that you can kind of rely on to give you that kind of leg up in a game and to bring you for the next phase. I mean, James Ward-Prowse has got off to a fantastic start. I think was it 3 assists, 1 goal or something insane like that in his first few games. He looks like an absolute bargain. I think Mohamed Kudus, obviously I've done what everyone's done. I've watched the YouTube highlights clips and he looks like the best player in the world at the moment. Lucas Paquetá is like, he had a fantastic tail end of last season. He's continued it this season. He seems to be working really well with the new midfielders there. Alvarez looks like a good enforcer. He's not got the range that Declan Rice has got, but if you want a holding midfielder that's going to break up play, he looks like a good purchase and cost virtually nothing as well. And I think Dino at the back, we haven't seen him put on a West Ham shirt yet, but he looks like a quality ball playing centre back, and it's been a long time since we've seen one of them at West Ham. So yeah, I think we'll actually do all right without him. And actually, we've probably got a stronger squad as a result of that transfer.
You call that, was that Justin? Do you call him Tino?
Dino.
Why Dino? Because
I've no idea. That's his nickname. But I can't pronounce Mavropanos or whatever it is. So,
I don't think he did too bad there.
Dino.
But Dino to his mates. I think you've got some exciting players there. That Mohamed Kudus looks good. And I think you've got a lot to look forward to with those new players. One other question about Declan: were you surprised that he only wanted to go to Arsenal, knowing that City were interested?
I kind of get why he did, because I think he was guaranteed game time at Arsenal, and you looked at that Arsenal team, and he was one of maybe 2 or 3 positions that they desperately needed, and it was really clear how Declan Rice could improve that Arsenal team. So I think he could see that as being an instrumental part of that team. I think when you look at City, it's a slightly different story. I think if you were going to go, there's a player that plays in your position that's probably as good as you in the Premier League, then it's Rodri. Like, I'm sure City fans will say Rodri's miles better, but I think there's a fag paper between them of that. And he probably also looked at Calvin Phillips and what's happened with him at Manchester City, because for a while it was Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips, and they were the two kind of promising young English defensive midfielders. And Calvin Phillips has gone to Manchester City, and for whatever reason, it's just not worked for him.
So I'm going to say about Calvin, people mention it, but he's been injured.
Yep.
And he came back from the World Cup a little bit, I think, unfit. And it got to the stage where, unfortunately for Calvin, Pep didn't trust him.
Yeah.
But Pep had got, by then, a settled side. And he dropped Phil Foden, who'd started the season on fire. I think he scored a hat-trick against Man United. He looked electric, him and Haaland in the link-up play. And then Foden got injured. Then he had his appendicitis. And no matter how good he was at the start of the season, where he was one of the first names on the team sheet, he wasn't getting a look in. And Pep had his settled side. He maybe changed 1 or 2 defenders, but everybody else, the forward 6, nothing changed. So Calvin Phillips had no chance at that point because he'd not played. And I think, people look at it, I think it's a bit unfairly. And what he did for England the other night, he looked all right. Yeah. He actually looked pretty decent. You think he's not bad. So I'm hopeful that he'll get a chance. And I don't think Declan, the way we're set up now, I don't think Declan would have been fighting with Rodri for his position. I think he would have gone alongside Rodri. So we'd have had 2 of them. Kovacic would have probably gone a little bit further forward, or we'd have had the opportunity for the people to... Rodri would have stayed where he was. I think Declan could have done that box-to-box work. Kovacic would have dropped back to cover if Declan goes up. And I think that's how we've done it, because obviously we knew a long time ago that Gundogan was leaving. We knew that, and we needed a replacement. And I think Declan and Kovacic would have been there. But I was a bit disappointed. I
wonder whether there's an element of the project that's attracted him to Arsenal as well, because he's a very intelligent, rounded personality, Declan Rice, when you hear him speak. And I imagine, like, if you look at Manchester City from a project point of view, you go, well, they're top of the game. They're kind of like, the only thing you can achieve at Manchester City is the same that's been achieved before now. Whereas if you go to a club like Arsenal, which is clearly on the up and up, you've got Pep Light in the dugout, that can offer similar things to Pep Guardiola in terms of player development. And you look at that and go, actually, I could be key to something really exciting and really interesting here. And if you boil it down to what's going to be the more exciting ride for kind of the next 3-4 years, then you can kind of see the attraction of Arsenal, I think.
No, I totally understand that. I mean, if Arsenal win the league or do well this season, maybe in Europe, Declan will be a hero if he's been instrumental in that. If he comes to City, well, we've already got so many heroes. There'll be 4 or 5 ahead of him that we'll look at. Haaland's got all these goals, or Foden's been brilliant, or KDB's come back from injury and he's fantastic in the defence. And he'll just be one of a number. So I can understand that as well, why the opportunity to be one of the stars is attractive rather than one of the many. One star, you mentioned him already, is Lucas Paquetá. Obviously, he was linked with City. It looked like that was almost done and dusted. The feelings I had, it was done and dusted. And then suddenly, right at the death, we had this issue with the betting scandal. And obviously, the move was called off. Now, a lot of West Ham fans, initially, some of them said, well, he was not that good for us last season. Let's take them on and be happy about it. And then when he didn't move, a lot of West Ham fans seemed to be, the noises out there on social media were that it's fantastic, he's not going, he's a great player. Where do you stand on Paquetá and that non-move?
I think whichever way it had gone, I think actually most West Ham fans would have been happy with it, because if he'd gone for 85 million quid, then that's a fair price for a player who had had half a decent season at West Ham. Whereas if he stays, and he has obviously stayed, we've got a quality player for the next 12 months of his contract, I'd imagine. I don't think he'll go in the winter. So I think we're looking at a potential move next summer. He's got a release clause that kicks in next summer that means he can leave for 85 million quid. So I think if he continues on the form that he's in, unless West Ham can fulfill his aspirations and what he wants to achieve in football, I think he's probably gone at that point. But yeah, I think it's for the transition of West Ham without Declan Rice, it was fairly important that he stayed, even though he's a relatively new face in that dressing room and a new face on the pitch. I think what he brings to that midfield is really exciting. And it took him a little while to settle in England. And you could see him trying and trying to make things happen in the first half of the season, but it wasn't until the second season that he really kind of got his teammates around him and was able to plan his passes. But he's a player that's kind of got a little bit of everything. And I think he would have been a great choice to replace Gundogan, because I think they're quite similar players in that they're able to break up play when they need to. But at the same time, they've got a brilliant eye for a pass. And what I love about Paquetá, and you might see this surrounded by 3 players, and somehow he'll suddenly be 5 yards away with the ball at his feet. He's just got that kind of ability to just get out of really tight situations. He has got an element of the super fall overs about him, and he does like to find the floor quite easily, but he's Brazilian. And which Brazilian doesn't like doing that? But yeah, delighted he's around. But if we've got 85 million quid in the bank for him, I think the business, or 200 million quid for 2 midfield players over summer's decent business, isn't it?
More than decent, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Or for a guy that you paid about 53 million quid for the year before, who'd, as you said, had half a decent season, the second half of the season, to be able to get, I think it was going to be about 80 million plus some add-ons.
Yeah,
I thought was great business. Are you worried about the situation with this betting scandal? Because on the surface of it, from what I've read, he's got a big problem. And if you look at someone like Ivan Toney, and it's coincidental that he's, I think, returning to training today. He can't play for another 4 months, another 16 weeks he's out. And he was betting on himself. And he was out, was it 8 months, Ivan Toney? It's a long time. What Paquetá has been alleged to have done, I think, is a lot worse with the spot fixing. To say, hey, it wasn't me, but there are 4 or 5 of your mates or family. And this, it's another coincidence that they actually bet with Betway, who are your sponsors, and that they all opened accounts around the same time, put the maximum in they could. And then not only are they putting a bet on Paquetá getting a yellow card, when I don't think he got too many yellow cards last season. I think he got 4. 3 of them are being investigated. If that wasn't enough, they doubled it up with a fella in Spain, a Brazilian player in Spain, to get a yellow card on the same weekend. I mean, that's just like, I used to work in internal audit. Any one of those is a big red flag. And you chuck them all together, there's no such thing as coincidences. There's so many issues there. Are you worried that if this comes to pass, that he's found guilty of all this, if Ivan Toney's out for 8 months, I mean, this is something that you can go to prison for, because
in terms of the ins and outs of the case, I'm not stupid enough to comment on a live legal case.
It's not in terms of I'm commenting. Sorry, it's not. He's not been charged with a criminal offence or anything. It's not a live legal case. It's just an FA investigation. So that's. I'm also very careful about what I talk about, but it's not illegal. And until he's charged, people will talk about it.
I don't think the whole trial by social media and kind of going by what we can see in the public eye, what's been tweeted, what's been reported, who knows what's true and what isn't, what's fabricated, what's exaggerated, how deep it goes. It could be worse than we know. It could be less worse than we know. And I think, the one thing that goes in Paquetá's favour is that there is potentially that element of removal, that he's not physically bet anything, but it's a consortium of people. But as you describe it, there are red flags there. More importantly, I think, if he faces some kind of ban, obviously that is devastating for the football club and it's devastating for him as a player, because you're not just talking about 9 months out of football. And Ivan Toney will find this when he returns to football. He may be training with Brentford at the moment, but if you've ever played football at any level, from five-a-side to Champions League football, whatever it is, you'll know that there's a lot of difference between playing in a training match and playing in a competitive match. So it's not just that 9 months, it's the 3 months getting back into that match fitness as well that's a real issue. So again, like you're talking about potentially a year. You've got to see what happens. I mean, there's no point in preempting these things and these scenarios, but if it does happen and he's found guilty, then there's only one person that you can blame for that. And there's a reason why these rules exist in football. It's to make it fair and make it competitive. And so the players that are going against those rules and who are impacting it being fair and competitive, I'm afraid they kind of deserve the bans they get. So if he is found guilty and the evidence is there, then you've just got to take the punishment.
Yeah, I mean, all the players are warned. You know, they do go through these training programs, and
exactly, they know the rules, and it's like the one reason they're doing it. I mean, potentially you could argue it's out of boredom, but there's plenty of other ways to get rid of your boredom. Go and play golf. I'd love 4 hours out of my day to go and play golf, but the other element is financially, and I don't understand. I mean, how people who are rewarded so richly, and there are very few professions that reward you as well as being a Premier League footballer, why that greed element is there.
If you
To go and get more cash out of it, I don't know.
Well, maybe you sometimes I think maybe they're feeling they're helping their mates, because it's their mates who are putting the bets on, and you're helping them with that. Well, just give them the cash.
Yeah.
I think we'll find out. And this, I don't want to say too much about this, but it's if you go down the line of Joe Lewis in America and what he's done, allegedly helping his staff, and stuff, it can get very bad very, very quickly. Obviously, like you say, we will have to wait and see. The way the FA take their time, it could take ages. But I think it was interesting that it came out after another game where a yellow card of his was questioned. And I think it just feels like the FA said, look, we're going to have to do something, because whether, he's innocent until proven guilty, but we're looking at the stuff from last season and it looks like it's carrying on potentially. And we're going to have to make an announcement. It's one of those things. If West Ham I think I'd said at the time, if West Ham had took City's first offer, he wouldn't be your problem anymore.
It's very interesting. The timing was very interesting, actually, why the news came out at that time. We'll probably never know the answer to that, but it's exactly at what stage and why at this stage of the investigation, because it was something that's being looked at, that it's suddenly become public knowledge that this was a potential concern. I think that's really interesting. Like I say, we'll never probably know that part of it.
My feeling for that was because there was another incident, he got another yellow card, which people said, hang on, that doesn't look exactly right. And I know at the time last year when he got that yellow card, I know before the game, well, I didn't know at the time, I've seen it subsequently, there's an Arsenal fan who tweeted that the probability, the betting price on Paquetá getting a yellow card, he was odds on. And that's just like crazy for a guy who's hardly got any yellow cards in the season to get a yellow card. And he said, something's up. You can't be odds on. And the only way you're odds on, it usually is because of the weight of money.
Yeah, of course.
That it's something happening, and then doubling it up. As I said, that's one thing about people who, let's say criminals, people are doing something wrong, or they find a loophole, they exploit it, is they get greedy. They go too far. And if you're happy just skimming a little bit, that might not be noticed. It's when people try and take too much, or you've got a system for betting that's working on small numbers, and then you say, right, well, it's working on small numbers, let's put some big numbers, and it doesn't work. So it's when people start getting greedy, that's when they can get found out. But like you say, we'll wait and see. I think the FA have got to start working on this quickly, because you can't leave the guy, whatever happens, in limbo for months and months and months while you're doing this. I think they've got to move quite, and they should be able to move quite quickly. And it all depends if it ends up going to the police. If they say, yes, this is a police issue, then I don't know whether the police would wait for the FA to finish. But as we saw with the Pakistani cricketers, they went to jail for that. And Mohamed Amir, who was one of the most promising, he'd already broken through. He was a brilliant player. And then when he came out of prison, even though he was still very good and he got back into the Pakistan team, he wasn't the same. He never got back to the trajectory he was on, because the trajectory he was on was to be best in the world. And, like you say, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Ivan Toney when he comes back playing in the new year, as to how good he's going to be and how long it takes. It might take him another 6 months to get back into it. So, and by then, he's changed his agent. He might be off from Brentford. I mean, let's not go to Ivan Toney. So let's just finish off, round it up by saying you're doing well this season, results-wise. So that's obviously, very good. Your fans are very positive. You've, in the league, won 3, drawn 1. That first game against Bournemouth, you're on a good run. You've won 3 games on the bounce. Where do you think you can get to this season, realistically?
I think there's 2 factors that will play into how well we'll do this season. One is going to be the pressures of playing in the Europa League, and the Europa League is a step above the Europa Conference. There were periods last year, particularly towards the end of the group stages, where we were able to play the kids, basically, like dip into the youth academy. And I don't think you can get away with that in the Europa League. So there's going to be more strain on what is a relatively tight squad at the moment, with not a huge amount of squad depth. So I think that will play a part in how the team perform in the league. So I don't think the current position we're in, that I think we're 4th, but 10 points, so kind of like mathematically second. But that's not achievable. I'd be quite satisfied if we kind of have a decent run in the Europa and finish top half. I think that's probably where expectations are this season. The other huge thing that I think is going to play a part in West Ham's season is how well we do from an injury perspective. Now, at the back, I think we're fairly solid, and there's a reasonable amount of cover. Don't quite know who's going to be kind of the centre-back pairing at the moment, but as far as I'm concerned, there's a relatively good first and second option in most positions. Similarly, in midfield, there's kind of a relative amount of depth there. I think where we really struggle this season is how we look up front. And ultimately, you've got Mikel Antonio and Jared Bowen that you're relying on as a front 2. Jared Bowen's a winger, but he's classed as a striker as far as West Ham are concerned. Mikel Antonio is a wing back, but he's classed as a striker as far as everyone's concerned. And there's no depth there at all. I mean, that's the big failing of West Ham this transfer window, was to bring in that kind of marquee striker signing. Mikel Antonio, did relatively well last season in terms of injuries, but he's susceptible to a hamstring every now and again. He's a big lad. He's carrying a lot of weight, muscular weight, rather than you and I Christmas dinner weight. But so he's carrying a lot of weight. He's susceptible to injuries. Jared Bowen is fantastic and so important for us. If either of those get injured, we just haven't got the depth there to do anything. I think Danny Ings is totally the wrong player for West Ham. He's not the big, strong, battling striker that we need with the way David Moyes plays. So I think they'll be the things that really impact us. Mid-table, I think, would be a very fair result that most people would actually be happy with this season.
I thought you'd do, with all the money and everything else. I think maybe if you sold Paquetá, you might have got that striker with using some of that money. But the other thing is about the Europa League. Now that you're in there, I mean, you've got obviously 2 important competitions. Do you look at the Europa League as one that you want to give it everything? Because, hey, at the end of the day, you've got a chance to win a cup. Or would you want to go back to focusing on the league and making sure you have a decent run this season?
It's very difficult to choose, isn't it? I mean, we're never going to be in a situation where we win the Premier League, not within the next decade at least. So I think survival is always important. It's always important to have a good league form. But when you've got the opportunity to perform well in a cup and the opportunity to perform well in a European Cup as well, who knows when the next time West Ham will be playing in the Europa League is. So I think, despite the fact we've had 2 European seasons on the bounce and this is the 3rd, I think you kind of got to go all in, and you've got to put your weight behind that. I think we've been blessed slightly with a fairly easy group stage. And when you're beyond the groups, you're in knockout stages, and it's a roll of the dice. It's a complete lottery. Anyone can go all the way. And I'd kind of back us against most teams in the Europa League as well, with a few exceptions. I think in a one-off game, you never know what's going to happen, and I think most fans would tell you that should be the focus. That it's your league's important. You need to remain in the Premier League for the future of the football club. But in terms of having a focus and something to go after, I think a cup run's something very special.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've probably, with such a good start, you probably going to stay in the league this season at 10 points. You're 10 points or 9 points better off than some clubs, and probably 10 points better off. I'm not sure what the league.
Always look at every season, look at the 35-point mark. That's the one to get to. And it's like, doesn't matter when you get to it. It could be like Christmas and you're going, we're safe. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not safe yet, but
No.
I think the start has been good. I mean, you've got Burnley on nothing, Luton on nothing, Everton, who are going down. I think even with the new ownership on 1 point, Sheffield United on 1 point. If you can't find 3 worse teams than you out of those 4, then you'd have had a calamitous season.
Yeah.
So I think you'd be safe. It'll be interesting to see how, like you say, how you fare in the Europa League, with it being a little bit more difficult than the Europa Conference League. Last question, because we've been on for a little while. Got to ask you for a score prediction, Jim. How much are you going to beat us by? Come on, hit me with it. We can take it. We can take pain.
Do you know, like I said, West Ham's game this season is about resilience and about containment. And I think when you've got a Norwegian robot up front, that becomes very difficult to contain. So I'm not massively optimistic. I mean, I've seen West Ham beat City a few times in their new guise, so I'm not going to rule it out completely. And I don't think we're in for a complete tonking either. But I don't think West Ham will score, and I can see Haaland getting a couple. So I'm going to go West Ham 0, Manchester City 2.
Oof! I'm having a look through the records now to see when last time you beat us. You did beat us in 2021. I
remember winning 1-0 at the Etihad, and I was there. So that I can't remember when that was.
Wow! That we're going to go back. You want to go back a long way, Jim? To what? You're going to go back to a time when I probably had some hair. You beat us in the league. I remember that I think it was on penalties a couple of years ago, and then you beat us in 2015 up in Manchester 2-1, and you beat us in 2014 2-1 down at your place. So, but it's not been a lot of, to be honest, wins for you in the Premier League era.
No. Few and far between, but they do happen every now and again.
Yeah,
we haven't beaten Brighton for 8 odd years, so you never know.
It's going to be interesting, because if you're only getting 20% possession against Brighton, actually, I think when we played Brighton, they had more of the ball than we did. So that's how good Brighton are with the ball. So you reckon 2-0? Yeah. I mean, City kind of obviously go one or two ways. They scrape these wins because teams are going to be ultra defensive, and I think West Ham will be. Or we thrash teams like Burnley. We smashed Fulham. Regardless of Marcus Silva's protestations, we were a far better side. We created a lot more chances, and that offside goal, where yes, it might have been offside, but I think we'd have won anyway. So we kind of do that. I just think if we score an early goal, then I don't think the heavens will open, but I think you'll be in for a tough day. But do I give you a goal? I mean, I remember when Antonio scoring against us a couple of seasons back. So I'm going to go City to win 3-1. I'll give you a goal.
The trouble with Antonio, he needs about 5 chances to score 1. So he's like Andy Cole back in the day when he just needed a load of efforts to kind of get a goal. So
I think that game against City, he outmuscled Ruben Dias in the box, and he turned him. Yeah, I think it was Ruben Dias tried to get too close, and he just outmuscled him and hooked it in. And I think it was 1-1 that game. I think we had to come back from that. But
here's a good stat for you to leave you with. I've just found out when the last victory against City was. It was 15 matches ago, and it was that 2-1 game at the Etihad. So we've not beaten you in 15 games in the Premier League. The only team with a longer winning streak against them is that lot down the road from you. So it's Manchester United, who went 16 games. We didn't beat them in 16 games in the Premier League. So you're not quite matching up to the Red Half of Manchester yet.
Hang on, I don't like coincidences because it took 16 games to beat Man United, and you haven't beaten us for 15. So if you beat us tomorrow, that'll be the 16th. Oh no, Jim, you've set me up here. But you've left it for 40 odd minutes, and you're setting me up to knock me down. I'll be honest, I wouldn't be gutted if we lost, but I'd be disappointed because I just think City are a machine. There's no other way to look at it. And Pep's system seems to be working. It'd be interesting. Obviously, Pep's been away for a little while, a couple of weeks with his back operation. It'd be interesting to see how he slots back in. But I can't see us. I think 3 points is a must because of the way the league is for us at the moment. Liverpool, I think, will be strong. Arsenal, I think they'll be up there. And I think Brighton will continue to get to be up there as well. And Spurs, no one wants to see Spurs at the top of the table, but they're there. So I think we've got to look at this game. We've got to say we've got to win. You can wait till next season to beat us or something.
Fair enough. I'll take that.
Yeah, Jim, thanks a lot, mate. Thanks so much for coming on. And hopefully it'll be a good game, and hopefully we'll have another chance to speak later in the season. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.